Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe coming at you with Rupert Scriven. How you doing today, Rupert?
Very well, thank you very much. Very well indeed. Great to see you
Happy to
again
have
after
you.
the Wonderlands conference.
Yeah, that was a really fun time with you. And so Rupert had probably the most interesting book at Wonderland on display when I rolled up, and it was what, Vintage Disco Biscuits is the title of your book?
The title is The Art of Ecstasy by Vintage Disco Biscuit.
Yeah, it's and you don't see this very often. There's a couple museums in San Francisco that have a lot of really great blotter acid art, signed by the artists, sometimes signed by the chemists, and with real acid on it, which is interesting. And I think they had to defend that in court a number of times, and they won. So it's still there. It's a beautiful thing. And now, not like we have a MDMA or ecstasy museum, but we have a beautiful book with a lot of really great photography and art. And I guess I don't want to go too far into your book first without talking about you, Rupert. Yeah, let's dig into that. So,
Right, go for it, my friend.
So you're from the UK. You timed it really well. I think the UK had one of the most interesting early club scenes, especially with MDMA. And sounds like you were right in the thick of it.
Very much so, very much so. From the start, thankfully.
So how did this stuff...
Had any adverse effects?
How did it start to come on your radar? MDMA or the club scene?
I think the club scene came on first. At the time, the music scene, especially because I'm from the Yorkshire, so I'm from Leeds, and the north of England really had a real explosion of the house music culture from the beginning, from local talent and also from international talent from New York, Detroit to Chicago coming over, and sort of showing us their sounds. And the two mixed together very, very well. And it really did change the culture and society as a whole, because at the time there was Thatcherism. You know, I mean, Margaret Thatcher, our sort of a prime minister, and there was a lot of disdain. There was a lot of discomfort, and this was just an outlet for everybody to enjoy themselves, whoever they were. So you could be a street cleaner, you could be an MP, you could be a policeman, you could be anybody. Everybody came together on a Saturday or Friday night, and you just partied. You know, it started with the rave culture, and obviously the powers that be didn't really enjoy that. But alongside the house music and the early house music, there was this little friend called ecstasy, and it was a love drug. And it was really sort of instrumental in bringing the two together, and in doing so, it really had a positive effect on society, getting rid of something that's unfortunately the UK is known for in the 80s, which is football hooliganism. You know, all of a sudden, from people fighting, in different teams fighting after a game. Well, not the teams, but the supporters. All of a sudden, they were hugging in bars and clubs. So that really just shows the positive effects that this little sort of pill had.
So Margaret Thatcher, was that late 80s or early 90s?
That was well, throughout the 80s, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the US, we had the Stark Club in Dallas, Texas. That was kind of the first epicenter for ecstasy, and I think there were just big bowls of it at the music venues, which is really interesting.
Yeah,
I need to interview more people about that. That's a really interesting scene too, in the middle of Texas, of all places. Yeah. But UK, during Margaret Thatcher, it was a hard time.
That they went hand in hand, and this, I mean, we can lead on to this with the book and the significance of obviously me trying to capture all these biscuits in their beauty. Is because each of these pills, even though they're only 8 millimeters across, that stamp it didn't signify just quality. It signified somebody's memory of meeting a friend, a loved one, an experience, a time. You can go on any forum and people go, "Oh, can you remember the Dove? Can you remember these sort of green Mitsubishis? Can you remember the sort of New Yorkers?" and you can ask them, and they'll be able to recap a full story or an experience they had just from that one element.
That's interesting. Yeah, like I think the I think I personally missed the that whole rush of really interesting pills with really interesting art, patterns, colors. You
Yes,
know, it was at most now it's a small little heart or lightning bolt or something.
yeah,
These days in my world. Um, and I actually try not to suggest people eat pressed pills anymore. Just
yeah. Well, the
um,
thing is, it's the toxicity. Well, the strength of them now. Speaking to my friend Professor Fiona Mesham from the Loop, which is a drug awareness
yeah,
and testing charity in the UK. The issue that there is now is going back into the late 80s, early 90s. You were dealing with MDMA, which was obviously from saffron root, and it was a pure derivative. And so you hear these things about people double dropping. Now, the idea of double dropping a pill nowadays is, something sort of quite farcical. But at the time, it was okay because the levels of MDMA were suited for the clubber. But nowadays, it's a case of they'll put the strength of them up to a certain level. So you'll probably get three, four pills in one pill, and the general clubber doesn't realise this. And it's only due to the fact that, say, if a dealer's caught with one pill, they're just going to get a slap on the hands. If they're caught with four or five, they're going to get a bit more than that.
right. And that's a big difference in UK and US drug policy and enforcement.
Yes,
There's we get charged on weight purely, I think.
yes,
I believe. I could be wrong. I'm not a lawyer. And yeah, I remember there being very, very strong pills in the UK because the intent was you could break them in half and share,
yes,
which
yes.
is, nice. But how do we get that education out to people? I think that's a really
Exactly,
important
exactly.
point.
I mean,
Yeah.
some manufacturers of these pharmaceuticals, as I would say, are sort of try and give a leaning idea to the sort of the end user. I mean, there was a pill a few years ago called an Audi, which was 4 circles, and anybody could really think, well, just have a bite. Less is more at the end of the day. As my mum always said, everything in moderation, Rupert.
Yeah. Um, so you had a really beautiful story about you would come home from your church. Do you remember that one? Can you tell
Yes,
that?
yes, yes, yes. Now, I mean, this is one of the images I've got in my book is the very sort of saintly, I mean, it is the two hands crossed as if somebody was going to Holy Communion. And in the middle, you've got the rosary beads and the cross, and you've got a dove pill. And the hands that I use on that, the hand model is my mother's. And the reason for that, there's a lot more symbolism than just uh, the images I've put together. I've come from my sort of twisted creative mind, but they're also, some of them have got, very personal meaning to them. And this one in particular, because I used to come home from the club 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. For instance, I come in the sort of black sarong, see-through sarong with a pair of wings on my back, sort of Mario war paint, that I'd put on. My God, the outfits I used to go out to at the time were fantastic. It all stems from the two gentlemen, Nick Raphael and Paul Fryer, and Susie Mason as well, who used to live with Damien Hirst in Leeds, and they set up a club called the Kit Kat Club, which became Vague. And Vague was very much to mirror the sort of Studio 54 atmosphere. So everything went. It was very much a mixed gay club, some beautiful ladies. Everybody just went down there to enjoy themselves. There was no judgment about anything. Any judgment was kicked out through the door. And it was a case, so I'd come home, as I say, 6, 7 in the morning, and my mum would be getting up. I'd be coming home from my church, slightly worse for wear, and she'd be going to hers fresh as a daisy. So that's where the symbolism of the sort of hands came in.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And another interesting point here, and we chatted about this a little bit before we recorded,
Yes.
but most ecstasy users would have consumed their whole collection, but you had some sort of affinity for it, and you kept everything. And I guess so.
Yeah.
Why did you always have the intent?
Well, I think it's. I mean, I've always been creative in my mindset. I mean, it all stems from collections. We all have little collections as we go on. You know, the sticker collection when we were a child. To then, I had a stamp collection, jersey stamp collection, because originally I was from my family's from the Channel Islands, and then from there it went on to holidays. I'd always come back with a rock or a boulder from wherever I went to sort of. So I've got that memory of that place, something I can actually touch and feel, whether it be sort of a volcanic rock from Santorini or a sort of piece of pig granite from Jersey. And that sort of stemmed into the biscuits. It was a case of I'd see something that, I mean, obviously they've um, changed over the years, over the last 25 years in their consistency, but most things don't stay the same. And I'd see this pressing and I'd just think, oh, I want to keep one of those. At the time, I didn't really see the logic of why I was doing it. I just did it. And obviously, because it is illegal, my father had a cottage down south. And I mean, when I went down to see him, I said, can you just look after these? He promptly got me a cigar box, put some cotton wool in it, and said, right, there we go. And so I proceeded to tell him each one every was. Now, I did feel some people may say, well, God, you were that open with your parents. I wasn't so much with my mother. She was very much sort of, schooled in a sort of convent and very sort of religious, and everything should be the way it should be. Especially with her father coming from Scotland Yard, which is obviously the police in the UK. But my father, who was being a lifeguard, an architect, is in the Marines and the Special Forces. He and a rugby player. He's had a plethora of careers over his lifetime. He had a different viewpoint. His viewpoint was life is short of finite. At the end of the day, rules are made by few and they're to be broken. As long as we don't harm anybody in the process, it's all good. So he was happy enough to look after these biscuits. And to be honest, after a few years, I forgot about them. It's only when he sold his cottage and came back up north, and he said, "Rupert, what do you want to do with your collection?" And I said, "What collection?" And he said, "Your collection." Now this is when we were sat for dinner with my mother, and I was just like, "Oh, that collection, right?" So all of a sudden, I had this box I hadn't seen for many years. Opened it up, and it was just a thing of beauty. Now the thing is, over time. And a lot of people, when they've contacted me, have said, well, why aren't they white? Well, they look a bit sort of dirty. And the thing is, the binding agents have changed. Now, obviously, the MDMA crystal is quite a pure substance. And I'm sure that it's been noted before that if you had it back at the time of the pharaohs and, picked it up now, it should have the same potency, if not probably stronger. But the binding agents, a lot of these pills were made in somebody's garage somewhere. They change. Now, it doesn't really have an effect when you look at it when it's 8mm across. But when you take a macro camera, it blows your mind. It really does. And so, at first, what I wanted to do was document these biscuits. So, with the help of my friend Adam McLaughlin, it was a case of he had the super camera, I had the great lenses, I had the collection, and we did this over about 4 or 5 sessions. Now, when I say sessions, we'd start with a positive outlook on this, and we'd start right. We're going to get this done. After a few beers and so on, it'd be 4 or 5 in the morning. But this is another thing. A friendship was born and created from just doing that, and we did each one. So each pill was done with macro photography, with sort of extended lenses and everything, the right lighting, and the lighting was the main thing, because obviously these stamps are some of them quite shallow, so to get the right shading so they actually pick up, so rather than just blinded by sort of whiteness. And obviously we had to go through minute millimeters in focus to go through, because as far as I was concerned, and this goes with all my composition artwork, you never know where somebody's going to view it. A lot of photography artwork, you look and the rest is out of focus and it blurs out. And sometimes it's for dramatic purposes. Other reasons is it just wants to pinpoint that area. And since I had this sort of object that wasn't going anywhere, I thought I could go through the layers, and once those were built up to a meter, as my father said, they almost look planetary. You know what I mean? You've got a blue Nike pill that all of a sudden you've got these green, mottled greens and reds and all sorts of colours come through. And some look quite smooth, some look quite harsh. You know what I mean? And some break away, but they are a thing of beauty in themselves.
I love that, and I like that you took it so seriously and did
Well,
really, really great
we did,
photography.
and it's the whole process of doing them. I thought, if I'm going to do this right, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. If I'm going to do this right, I'm going to do this right. And this is why it took 4 or 5 sessions, because I'd start going through the editing and making sure they're okay. And then 2 days later, I'd ring Adam up and say, Adam, we're going to have to do this again. There's a few that aren't working. Because obviously I had to make sure they're all exactly the same, the colours and everything like that. And it worked out eventually. And all of a sudden I had this collection that looked fantastic. And then it was a case of, right, let's get this into some compositions. Some have got a serious note, and some are humorous, some are serious, and some are inspiring. But yeah, I mean, it was a case of, in a way, some of them are quite pop artish, and yeah, I enjoyed that process. I mean, it was, taking photographs of trout on the floor. I mean, and then the cat coming down, and for the first time ever, the cat thinking, "What the hell's happening here?" I mean, the smell of trout throughout the house. Because obviously we've got an expression in England called trout mouth, which comes from it's when you've had too much MDMA and your sides of your lips pulled down. You see them from a lot of sort of imagery from the sort of early raves and the clubbing photographs.
Mm. I like that. That's cool. And so how you did 5 sessions? You said of
We
photography.
did
Like,
5
was that over
sessions
the course
until
of
we
a
got
couple
it
of
completely
years?
right.
How long did that take you? Was it a couple months, a couple years?
Each session took probably about 4 or 5 hours each, and then as soon after the final one, it was a case of doing the editing, because you've got the photographs, you've got all the layers, and then basically it was a case of using Photoshop to actually sort of put all the layers together, and then sort of edit around it, and that took me a good few months after that. Now the actual compositions probably took me about 2 3 years, because it was not only just thinking of the compositions but getting them completely right, how they look best. You know what I mean, to the onlooker, to the viewer, as it were. And some images I put to the side because I just didn't feel they worked. But it was just a case of trying to catalogue them and come up with new ideas. And then really it's a case of then how to put them all together in a sequence. But I did. I mean, this stems before the book. I had the issue when I did my first exhibition in Leeds, and that was back in 2017. A lot of friends loved the artwork, but they just said, "Well, our parents are going to come round. We've got children. What are we going to say?" And really, I was trying to get rid of that taboo. Um, as sort of Professor Nutt has been stated, I mean, if you had to reclassify all drugs, alcohol and cigarettes would be right at the top. Ecstasy is quite far down. I mean, obviously, I'm not endorsing telling people to go out and have it, but it's got less of a sort of social impact and a personal impact health wise. So it's a case of just go along with it. So when I realised that nobody really was going to be putting the artwork on the wall, I thought, well, the next, idea, and it was brought to my friend. Um, uh, one of my friends turned around to me and said, "Well, why didn't you do a book?" I thought, "Well, that's a great idea. Put the book, so you've got it on the coffee table, you've got a full art gallery, and then when the parents and children are around, you slip on the book, and nobody's, it's all win win win." But then it's a case of, well, I didn't really want a book just on imagery. So I thought, right, well, with the help of my good friend Dave Beer, who's, at the longest standing nightclub in the in the world, with Back to Basics in Leeds, um, I went round and got his advice, and he was able to give me my first interview with Marshall Jefferson, who was a fantastic soul to meet. Followed by Bez from the Happy Mondays, and that just seemed to make it was like a domino effect. Then, as soon as somebody was involved, somebody else got involved. So I got the likes of Adamski, Robert Owens, Richard West, Mr. C, K Class, Alistair Whitehead. All these big names from the era came out, and really, I didn't want to ask them the same old questions. I wanted to ask them questions or have a conversation with them as if it were in an after party. You never know what conversations are going to come up in an after party. And this was a great thing. So I was getting some beautiful stories from them. I mean, one, because obviously the house music culture stems really from some disenfranchised gay and black communities in America. And so I really wanted to get somebody quite earthy like that. Now, a good friend, Sen One, who was one of the original graffiti artists in New York from the 80s, he gave me a story and it just blew my mind. It was almost like, oh God, let's see. Have you seen a film Once Upon a Time in America?
I don't know that I have.
You will have seen it with De Niro and everything like that, with Joe Pesci and everything. Beautiful movie. And it tells his story about, for instance, when they wanted to go see African Barbata, they had to go from one area of New York to another. They had to go across the Brooklyn Bridge. To get there, they'd have to get all tooled up to get there because they knew they'd have to conflict along the way. It was about him doing graffiti along the subways and getting chased by the police. And the reason, because I asked everybody, including Marshall Jefferson, what they wanted to do when they were a child. And Sen One just simply said, and it really hit a note. He said, "Well, we didn't think that far. We didn't. That's why we sort of, tagged our names because we didn't think we were going to live past 14, 15 years old." It's just like, blimey, Jesus. So to get his input is just, yes, he wasn't really into the house music scene, but like any after party, you never know who you're going to meet. So I've also got people like Professor Nutt and David Nutt and Dr. Ben Sessa in the book. I've got a good friend, Professor Fiona Mesham in the book. And so the book's entwined with all these stories. But then I was just like, well, I want to make this book a piece of art in itself. So why not make it into an after party? Give a few of these characters like little personalities, little job roles. So I've got Richard West, Mr. C, on the door. I've got Bez from the Happy Mondays, who's known for all sorts, and I've got him making cocktails. I've got sort of Professor Nutt and Dr. Sessa sat in a bath. Now, when I told Ben this, he was just like, "We sat in a bath." I'm like, "Well, most after parties, people sort of dissipate, and then you think, where the hell is everybody?" And you go up to the bathroom, and there's everybody sat in the bath. You know what I mean? Obviously, with no water in it. So I've just got them sort of. So the introduction to them is both sat in the bath. Talking away, and sort of then me sitting down, having a quick cigarette, and just listening to the conversation. So it's the book itself has got a story overlay which you can flow through, or you can pick it up at any point, really. But there's some fantastic stories. I've got another great story from a good friend, Rusty Egan, who was from Visage. So him and Steve Strange set up the Blitz Club in London, and that was basically very reminiscent of Studio 54 in the way that you could be anybody. You weren't going to be judged. It set up the new romantic fashion. It sets up, bands like of the 80s, like Spandau Ballet. So when I asked him, I thought, I'm going to get a good story from him, but I didn't know what I was going to get. And it was a beautiful story about the love-hate of, Ecstasy. From him going over to New York with Mark Armand, meeting Ecstasy Cindy, and the whole process, and sort of going back to sort of coming back and at a point thinking and saying to his wife at the time, we either go down this path or we go down this path. If we go down this path, we're going to have to give up drugs, or we do this. And so I've got these very sort of open stories of some beautiful souls in the book. and they really sort of work well with the imagery and the artwork. So I've got some additional imagery within the book, which is, I mean, sporadic show. Referencing you're an after party, like a glass of whiskey, or sort of a cigarette going out in an ashtray. So that's what I've tried to create with the book. But
Yeah, I
I
love
did get
that.
a bit carried away, and obviously you've seen it for yourself. What was going to be a small book ended up being what could be described as a doorstop. So it's
It's pretty
376
big.
pages, 2 kilos in weight. So yeah, it got a bit out of hand.
2 kilos of MDMA is quite a bit. I think Max only had 1.4 made or something like that. Uh, they're still going strong. Amazing. So, what do you think it is about? We kind of touched on it earlier. What do you think it is about MDMA that really has that magic? Like, is it, I guess, compared to alcohol culture,
Well,
or yeah,
you well, alcohol culture is great, but everybody's drinking at a different speed, and everybody's got different tolerances. Yeah, so you could have you could be going out with your partner that petite lady. She could have the same wine as you, and she's like, right, I want to go home soon or whatever. Everybody's got different tolerances with alcohol, but the thing is with ecstasy, it's more of it enables I would say your love instincts coming out, whether that be from friendships, but talking to people, being there. It's just a beautiful drug to have. And it was of an era where there weren't many drugs in the club. This is why the late 80s, 90s clubbing scene was fantastic, because everybody was on the same level. You look now, and there's all these different drugs going around, MCAT, ketamine, MDMA, amphetamine. So everybody's on different levels. Back in the day, the club could be packed, but there weren't any real fights. You met your best friends you'd meet in the queue outside that you'd never met before. You'd sort of slide past people like sort of fish in a sort of, on a coral reef without bumping into each other, and it was just a beautiful time.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do find that a little
are you a
interesting.
tad envious?
A bit. I'd rather be alive today, but that was a pretty big miss. Um,
Yeah.
but it's interesting because I'm thinking about times I've gone out, and yeah, it does feel really disjointed. There are
Yes.
there are folks trying to bring that back. So you're rolling with a
Yeah.
crew of 20, and you do the same thing at the same time, and it's
Yes.
you get that same bonding with that group of 20. I think that's
Yes.
really beautiful. But how do we balance that with our weird modern drug market? And honestly, I'm trying to do MDMA like maybe only 4 times a year these days. I'm trying to save my neurotransmitters, because before it
Yes.
was a few times a weekend.
Well, there were ways around that. I don't know if it's just a popular myth, but the way around was make sure you have your greens. Make sure your serotonin levels aren't completely damaged. I mean, the I mean, a good thing was, everybody wanted the banana. Well, quite a lot of people had bananas at the end of the night, because I think it was the potassium in the bananas that sort of helped you I mean, the worst was you go out on a Friday, Saturday night, and it'd be the Tuesday, Wednesday come down. All of a sudden, it just hit you like a sort of brick. It'd be like, oh, Jesus Christ. But then you repair yourself and you'd be ready for the next Friday, Saturday night. Now, it wasn't like something you got addicted to at all. It was a party drug, so you didn't feel the need to do it throughout the week like you would probably cocaine or something like that. It was
Right.
just something you had then and there, and you enjoyed that moment.
So I've been around quite a bit of drugs in my day. I've only seen one person just kind of like doing it at the wrong time. and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I've only heard from one psychologist of somebody trying to use MDMA every day. And I think that's pretty good numbers, because I see people doing too much of other stuff all the time.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I
I must admit, it's one thing I think is underestimated. Take it away from the club scene. And I've tried this out rather than just biscuits now, but MDMA itself. Going to the cinema. If you want to see a film at the cinema, just a sort of small rock of MDMA with good company, you mean it's just a beautiful experience. And the other thing is when I mean, obviously, I think it did have its origins in couples therapy, and I know when I've had sort of, sort of, disagreements with my partner, that can solve a situation straight away. It really can. It can get rid of all this stupid sort of items that angry or sort of you're having arguments about, which really, when it comes down to it, are nothings. They really are nothings, and it just sort of shows it up for that. So
Yeah.
it's a love drug. It's
Who was it? Was it Anne Shulgin that called it first? What was it? Penicillin for the soul, or something like that.
yes, yeah,
It's such a beautiful line. I know very few people who I'd be afraid to, given all things equal legally and otherwise, introduce it to folks. Very few folks I'd be afraid to do that I'm friendly with, right? And I can't say that for a lot of other psychedelics. Mushrooms maybe, but I'm not going to be pushing all the
no.
others.
I mean, it's quite funny you say that because I've had, as I recall, two girls who are good friends come up to me years after clubbing and said, I'd like to thank you, Rupert, because when they had their first pill, you were there for me. It was a case of, right, okay, I'm going to have this first time, okay, have half. Come back to them half an hour later, are you okay? And just keep on being there. And it just make their first experience enjoyable. And I think that's, some drugs can really sort of, if you're not used to a sort of certain feeling or sense of mind, it can send you over the edge because people like to be in control of their sort of, ways. I mean, it's just like alcohol. We all know the great way to sort of, if you've got spin in your head, what you do, you put the landing light on. Even though you've got your eyes closed, your mind's still sort of active to that light. So in the same manner, when you're having ecstasy, it's to have a good set of friends around you, to support you, rather than people, doing it by yourself.
Yeah, agreed. I have seen people make mistakes for sure. I'm sure you have too. But it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
how mistake number one, not telling people what you're up to, not necessarily having the right friends around you. Number two, big doses. Some people just have taken far too much. I saw one person once pretty much not be able to walk or stand for a good 2 hours maybe. Um, it was a little bit scary for a couple folks, but I didn't really think it was time to call for medical attention in any way
no,
yet.
no.
So we just wrote it
Well,
out.
as my mother said, everything in moderation, and it goes back to on Christmas. Obviously, me going out, coming back from my church, and her going to the church every Sunday morning, and it was a Christmas dinner up at a hotel, and we all sort of sat having after drinks in the lounge, and she just came out with it. She said, well, "Have you taken drugs, Rupert? What drugs have you taken?" And my sister used to go out clubbing with me, and she just put her head in her hands, thinking, "Oh God, Rupert." Because she knew that I was going to tell her. Because I mean, at the time, parents were really worried about heroin. That was a big thing. We had the tombstone, in the UK, sort of AIDS and such like, and they were worried about, that sort of thing. So I just explained every drug that I'd taken, the effects and everything like that, how often I'd had it. In some ways, yes, I know my mother would have preferred me to have said, "No, I'll never do drugs again." But she wasn't stupid; she was a realist, and so she just turned around to me and said, "Rupert, okay, but everything in moderation." Yeah, and I've tried to keep by that. I mean, yes, I've gone off on an angle sometimes, but we all do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've thought about MDMA quite a bit. Do you think there's a path forward for a recreational market of some kind? Like, I I would love to just go get very pure MDMA that I know is going to be,
I do, and it's just like
yeah,
I can remember talking to Marshall Jefferson about this, and as far as he's concerned, I mean, well, he said, "Rupert, at the end of the day, I mean, this isn't verbatim, but he was just like, it should be legalized and basically controlled, so you know exactly what you're getting." And so it's a bit like prescription. No, I'm not talking over the counter sort of headache tablets. I'm talking you have to go to the doctor and say, so he has got a record. You know, say if you go for strong sleeping tablets, even now, there's a record of how many you've had, and the doctor will only prescribe you so many. So you mean and have a balance between that, and obviously with its uses, obviously, hopefully, you know, with the FDA approval, you know, I mean, with MAPS trials, you know, I mean, it's going to be uh, legalized for sort of use for, I mean, post-traumatic stress disorder therapy. I think alongside that, there could be a balance, but I think as soon as there's, I mean, it can be seen as a guiding light for sort of medical issues like post-traumatic stress disorder. I think the government will probably sway more to thinking, well, okay, we're legitimizing this. Okay, we can be a party drug because I mean, think of the taxes they could be, I mean, making from this, and it would create a much safer environment for clubbers. Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure the authorities, like the police and such like, would have less of a headache as well.
agreed. You're somebody from the Loop presented at Horizons at New York a bunch of years ago and presented their data on actually lowering the amount of hospitalizations at a music festival. And I
Yeah,
think it was, I'm going to get the number wrong, but from what I recall, around 80% reduction in hospitalizations at a music festival by offering harm reduction services on site, like drug testing and
it,
whatnot. Like that alone.
that could have probably been Fiona Mesham, Professor Fiona Mesham. I mean, she's a fantastic lady. She's head of criminology. She was at Durham University. She's head of criminology at Liverpool University now, and it was a charity basically. I mean, there's no funding for it. I mean, you've got these professors, experts. I mean, volunteers all from all over the world coming to all these festivals and assisting in doing the testing. I mean, I've been to one at Boomtown, which is the south of England, which is the second biggest festival after Glastonbury in the UK. I went to that 3 years ago, and they're fantastic. They really are. They do an amazing job because you've got part of the sort of group, you know, volunteers giving sort of advice, drug advice, and you've got the other parts actually doing the testing, so people can hand their drugs in, or the police confiscated drugs. They'll bring them in so they can be tested. Now, if any of those drugs are seen to be dangerous in any way or form, you know, because they've got these, I mean, the laser, you know, this amazing laser that just shows all the consistencies and all the quantities of all these different elements within the drug that they've confiscated. That can be put out to all the drugs agencies within sort of the UK and Europe. And a few years ago, before the lockdown, there was only three festivals that didn't have the loop or some form of drug awareness testing charity at them in the UK. And there was three festivals that there were fatalities. Now that just speaks volumes. It really does.
Right. Um, it's really bad. I'm getting normalized to it. When I would go
Yeah,
to big music festivals, go, okay, at least one person's gonna die. You just have to know that, and it's like
yeah.
it sucks. And I
It does. It
really,
does. And
um,
it's not just about education. It's about getting this testing done. I mean, you go to other countries like the Netherlands, and they've got testing there. Yeah, I mean, we seem to be, yeah, I mean, well behind the pack, as it were. I mean, after going to Wonderland and meeting your good self in November, I was just amazed by so many people under one roof with the same vision. And these are people that are, I mean, you can very much respect. You know, I mean, you've got intellects there. I mean, putting their life and soul and the, you know, into trying to progress this sort of thing that's to anybody else. I mean, when we look back at history, this will be common sense. But at the moment, it's a case of, well, we prefer to go to Pfizer or Johnson, have some tablets that have been sort of approved. But I tell you what, if you had too many of those tablets, you're going to die. And it's exactly the same. If we actually sort of legitimised and sort of legalised MDMA and ketamine and such like, but had them at a certain, so this is how much you need to have. Because some people don't look at the instructions. When you have something out of the larder, you don't look at the instructions before you eat it. You just gobble it down. So I think it's some people do need to be reminded.
Mm, agreed. Yeah, it's a big this is a big problem to solve in the United States. We don't have much drug testing available at festivals. Um and it's because of some federal laws, and it's really dangerous for festival
Well,
promoters to
what they
even
do,
include it.
yeah, they're just sweeping it under the carpet. That's never solved anything. Sweeping something under the carpet and turning a blind eye to something and blaming it. They don't blame. If, say, for instance, a dodgy batch of vodka, came into the USA, they'd be down on it like a brick. But it's because, well, it's the same thing. You really need, because we're talking about public servants, the government's public servants, whether it's be in the USA, the UK, or any other country. We employ them, we vote them in to be there for us, for for our well-being and improving society. Not to turn around and say, no, we're not. This is how we're going to be. And I think it's very sort of, outdated, their opinions. The problem we've still got over in the UK is the Middle England, which is the voters, and unfortunately, that's what a lot of politicians go by: voters. As soon as Middle England dies off, I think hopefully things will change a lot quicker.
And that's kind of the way politics works, right? It's people get out of voting age or
God, we've got
pass,
really
and then
serious with this, haven't we?
well, yeah, we didn't have this conversation in Miami, but it's time. It takes time. I
It
think a
does. It
lot of
does.
cultural institutions just want us to go a little bit slower, for whatever reason. Safety, maybe. Who knows? But it's everywhere, right? It's not just in drug policy, but they want a slow, steady thing, so it's not as maybe disruptive as we would prefer.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Well,
I
I think a lot of times it's a case of that. The governments like to have suppressants. To your thought process, like alcohol, but when it comes to things that open your mind, like LSD or ecstasy, they're very quick to shut it down. And obviously that happened with the Vietnam War with LSD and such like. And unfortunately, there's social media out there now. We see so many things, and we can see a balanced narrative of everything. Whereas before, we were just sort of given what was spun to us by the sort of the media or the politicians.
yeah. So one conversation that comes up a lot here at Psychedelics Today is about um, where does the therapeutic thing actually happen? Is it only on the couch? Can it be on the dance floor? I'm kind of curious on your perspective there.
Well, I think it depends what sort of therapy you're looking at.
Yeah,
If
agreed.
somebody has undergone very traumatic experiences, it's just like with LEAP, the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, that obviously you've got in the USA and we've got one in the UK. I went to one of their talks in November, run by Neil Woods, that we both met at the Wonderland. And that was quite fantastic seeing, well, not fantastic, it was fascinating. Fantastic is the wrong word to use. And you're looking at people like serving police that were undercover. And from the scenes they saw and everything like that, they suffered severe post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's a case of how they can, they're really trying to champion the use of psychedelics for future treatment and therapy. Um, but then you've got, obviously Dr. Sessa. Obviously he's got he was co-founder of the Waken clinics we've got in England. We've got one in Bristol. We've got one in London. I believe there's a few others as well. And obviously he's got qualified therapists and bodies that will sit with the person, with the patient, and actually go through a program. and it's a set program of, you know, I mean, over sort of 7, 8 weeks. And you know, I mean, there will be, I mean, some use of. I think it's going through the ketamine trials. I mean, obviously they're hoping with the FDA approval of the MDMA with the MAPS submissions that hopefully I mean, some part of 2024 that they're going to start being able to sort of use it in some ways for, I mean, for treatment. But I mean, there's that way. But then if you've got the other side where you've got therapy for, what would I say, somebody feeling low, somebody having a loss, somebody losing their job, somebody just not feeling right in life, but it's more of a temporary item rather than something that's sort of really sort of quite deep. I mean, when I say deep, somebody who's being affected by sort of seeing something about being a war-torn country, but it means being
Right.
raped or that.
Right. There's like
That's quite strong. That's not something that I could think that you can solve on a dance floor, but something
right.
smaller. I mean, I think, I mean, on ecstasy, having the right people around you, big hugs, that can really change the sort of your focus and your mindset coming away from that sort of environment.
Right. I guess
I
one
mean, that's
thing
only my view. You know what I mean, it's
No, I think you're right though. There's people that I would not want to just say, here's some MDMA and go at it at the dance club. They're in a
because
really
at the end of the
delicate
day,
position.
yeah. Because at the end of the day, I mean, if they've suffered post-traumatic stress disorder and stuff like that, I would assume they're probably going to start coming back with questions. And I'm not qualified, and I don't feel I'm in the right place to actually sort of give them advice. It would be really quite sort of dangerous in my eyes to do so. But as I said, if somebody's, you know what I mean, lost a pet cat or something like that, or, you know what I mean, yeah, I'll give them a big hug and let's go and have a dance. Yeah.
Agreed. I've also seen veteran friends come back and figure out a lot on their own without actually going the therapy route. So I don't want to totally exclude that either. It's just what people feel comfortable with, really, in my opinion. And folks should have a lot of autonomy to really experiment here. So there's actually a nonprofit here in the U.S. where um, I think it's a little undergroundish, maybe, but I think they do take charity money. They actually bring soldiers to festivals, to music festivals, to really unwind and see
Yeah.
what's been going on since they were overseas, and that's apparently
I
quite
mean,
helpful for some
yeah.
folks.
I mean, I haven't been in the military, but my father was. He was in the Royal Marines, and then he went into the SBS, which is the one. I mean, you'll have heard of the SAS. It's the one just above that. So they work in twos. So it is friend him and Steve. They'd be out for in the middle of nowhere. My mum wouldn't know where he was in the world, and that really had a huge effect on his mindset. When he came back, when I was a child, every year or so, he'd completely lose the plot, and he found it very hard to hug. Now, he was a very loving father, but he found it very hard to hug. And I mean, that's one reason I used to take him clubbing. And it took me quite a few years. And I'm talking, I mean, I'm 50 this coming year, but I'd say it's only probably about 10, 15 years ago that, you know what I mean, when I said I love you, I got to love you back. And that was amazing. He's really developed over time, but in his own way. He's not going through any therapy. He's not one of these people who likes to take sort of any painkillers or any drugs or like that. He tries to sort of, which in some ways can be sort of a negative thing, sort of tries to deal with it internally, which sometimes I think is a wrong thing. But again, there weren't any of these treatments at the time. There weren't clinics like Awaken clinics like Ben Sessa's got at the moment, back sort of 15, 20 years ago. And I think this is a beautiful thing that's really changing in society now.
Yeah, agreed. It's a lot of work to get to where we are today, and we've got a lot of work left to do. Um, I love Leap, LEAP there, and they're,
Yes.
I think, going to be very influential with politicians, both in the U.S. and U.K. They already have been, but it's, um, we've all been sold so many lies that we've got to really,
Yeah, sift through.
unlearn.
I mean, some of the lies may have a bit of grounding, but there are a hell of a lot of lies that really need to be swept away.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think the whole Yeah, if we could figure out a way forward to get this stuff a lot more acceptable, I think culture would very much improve all over the place, right?
I, th- I, th- I think at the end of the day, it's enjoyment of life. I mean, every single one of us on this planet has got a lifespan, and it's quite finite and short. And yes, I mean, we're sort of programmed into sort of work ethic, and then pension, and then I mean, you've got a few years, and you're going to pop your clogs. But I do think, I mean, there needs to be a greater balance between work and life, as it were. I mean, you go to somewhere like Spain and all of the siestas. I know they have the siestas due to the sort of the heat and everything like that, but we need to have that greater balance. I mean, and then they go on about sort of having a 4-day week, working week, and having a 3-day weekend, and the sort of productivity goes up. Now, I honestly think if you're going to give, rather than sort of focusing on sort of letting people sort of drink the weekend away and coming back with a, I mean, grotty hangover on a Monday morning, having one night where they're going to sort of be uplifted and come back with a positive mindset. And to be honest, I do think, some drugs really do open the mind and the imagination and the focus is into being creative. And I think that, I mean, you look at some of the characters in society. I mean, we've got books like one who flew over the cuckoo's nest, and I mean, things like that. I mean, it's the creativity that is lost by being so sort of I don't know, regimented in sort of life is a real shame.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot more play.
A
Um,
lot more play, a lot more play.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And all right. So what's coming up on the radar for you? You've got you're going to be going to Miami again pretty
Well, yeah,
soon
yeah,
to
yeah.
start
Well,
talking
I'm
about the
I'm
book
going
again.
up to I'm going up to sort of Norwegian fjords with my father in at the start of March for a cruise. So that's going to be fun. But coming back on the Thursday, and then hopefully going to be going over on Friday to the music conference in Miami. So looking very much forward to that. We've got I'm going to be exhibiting some of my artwork and book at the next Leap UK seminar. So that's going to be fun. I think that's going to be around April time. Um, and then yes, I've got interest in the book over in Berlin. So I'm going to be going over to Berlin hopefully next month to do a book signing, and I've got the amazing Robert Owens, one of the house music classic legends. He's going to do a DJ set for me. And one thing I've found about doing this whole book is the beautiful souls that a lot of these people I looked up to musically when I was in the 80s, 90s. And a lot of them become friends, and they're just amazing souls. So it's just a case of the opportunities that are arising are just amazing for me. So I'm going to continue doing the book and plugging that. So pimping the book, as it were, for 2024. Well,
Outstanding.
2020. No, we're in 2023, aren't we?
For now. For now.
I just missed a year there.
So there's one story, Rupert, we didn't get to touch yet.
Yes.
There's a very famous DJ who most folks might know. I don't know actually how famous he is for this listener audience, but it's really famous to me. He has a photo that you gave him of one of your pills up on his wall. Carl Cox.
Carl Cox, yes.
That's
Yeah,
extraordinary. How did you make that happen with Carl?
it's a beautiful story. Our mutual friend Dave Beer, with Back to Basics and Leeds, was having his last night at the church. Now it's a beautiful church, so you can imagine the acoustics are amazing with a club event. And he was having the last event. Now he's looking around for DJs. Now a good friend of Carl Cox made him aware of this. Carl contacted Dave and said, "Oh, I'll come DJ for you." And Dave said, "I can't afford you, Carl. I really can't afford you." He said, "No, I'm doing this for free. I'm doing this for friendship." And that really does show what house music's about. Now, I knew it was going to be his birthday coming up, Carl Cox's birthday coming up. So I thought, well, as a sort of little thank you, I thought it would be nice to give him one of the. I mean, because I do these glycol prints, which are beautiful. I mean, 5 millimeters of clear acrylic with the image, and it almost looks sort of iridescent, sort of three-dimensional look about it. And it was a picture again of my mum's hands. I mean, so I just felt that was very symbolic, especially of where the last club event for Back to Basics being a church would be. So yeah, that was it means a hell of a lot that he's got on his wall.
Yeah, he's a absolute legend. Very kind. Yeah, just been a fan. I don't know, since high school probably. Carl
Yeah.
Cox. Yeah,
And he
so
gives amazing hugs as well. Yeah, I mean,
that's really good to know. So hopefully, life goal.
yeah,
uh, is he's in Australia? Is that right?
he's in Australia. I think he's in Melbourne. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's got a huge fixation about sort of cars, doesn't he? Uh,
Likely.
as,
Yes.
as speeding. So I mean, it's and actually, I noticed in the lockdown he had a growing passion for gardening as well, growing his own vegetables and such like. But yeah, I mean, from the short amount of time I spoke to him, he is a beautiful soul. But again, there's a lot of these people within the house music family that are like this, and this is one thing I want to get over. I mean, it's. I mean, one thing I say on the back of my book. Memories from the clubbers, DJs, producers, singers, musicians, and promoters, as together we were all equal as one family, a diverse family of different nationalities, cultures, genders, and sexual orientations, showing the true nature of inclusivity and the love of ecstasy in house music cultures have jointly given us since the late 1980s. And that really is what I tried to really drum home with the book. And so far, I've had some beautiful comments about the book. I had one friend, John Paynton, who say to me, he said, "It's amazing to read, Rupert. Who did the artwork?" I'm just like, "I did the artwork. I did the writing, so I could create the book." But no, it's been an honour to create, and it's just been fantastic. The sort of the response I've gained so far, and it seems to be going international. I had an order to Cambodia the other day and Singapore. So,
Fascinating. Well, it's really good. It is a global phenomenon, and it shows that this kind of thing. I don't want to super glorify drug markets, but I will a little bit. But
yeah,
there's this thing transcends the ability of law enforcement to really even slow it down, and it transcends cultures, continents, yeah, and
I
decades.
mean, it'll just keep on going. And I think it's not a case of trying to put a stop on it because that's just wasted government money. It's a case of actually, if you're going to do anything, try and control it and make it safe for the populace. That's the best way about doing things. Uh,
Yeah, and can you hold up the cover for us?
I can indeed, my friend.
Yeah,
There we go, my
awesome,
friend.
awesome.
The Art of Ecstasy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
gorgeous.
available at www.vintagediscobiscuit.com. Uh, and I do international sales, you know what I mean, wherever. I mean, if you're in Miami, it's available at the Winwood Collective. So yeah, I mean they've got copies there. But yeah,
Yeah, I
I
actually
mean,
made it in there the other day.
I,
Uh,
I feel really bad, Joe. Have you got a copy yet?
oh, not yet. Maybe someday.
Well, I'll have to send you a copy then, won't I? If you PM me your address, I'll get you a copy over next week.
Yeah, that would be beautiful, Rupert. Thank you. And yeah, anything else you want to mention or shout out before we wrap here?
Um, well, I mean, I've already shouted out my good friend Dr. Ben Sessa for, with his Awaken clinics. I mean, I'm super proud of him. I mean, Professor Fiona Mesham. I mean, she's been amazing with the Loop charity and all that she's offered to the clubbers and sort of festival goers of the UK. I mean, obviously, everybody that's been sort of contributed to my book. I mean, I'm eternally grateful, and it's just been amazing meeting good souls like yourself as well, my friend. So I'm enjoying this journey.
Yeah, good, good. Yeah, so Yeah, Rupert, thank you so much. Everybody, check out Vintage Disco Biscuits, and yeah, best of luck. I hope you sell a ton of them.
Thank you very much, my friend. Thanks very much. Thank you.